Hello again. I'm glad you found your way back. There's a story I've been waiting to tell you. A story that has been clawing its way out of the darkness. Are you ready to listen? So dim the lights, make sure your doors are locked, settle in, and listen closely. My name is Leo, and this was back when my fiancée Maya and I were still mapping out our future, blissfully unaware of how fragile a map can be. It was late October, that specific time in New England when the air gets sharp and carries the sweet decaying scent of fallen leaves. We'd escaped the city for a weekend getaway, heading for the quiet, rolling hills of western Massachusetts near the Berkshires. Our destination was a small, forgotten town called Stillwater Creek. Stillwater Creek was as quiet as its name suggested. Old colonial houses, weathered barns, and dense forests of maple and oak that crowded the narrow country roads. Outside the town, the landscape opened up into vast harvested fields, the earth looking tired and gray under an overcast sky. One afternoon, with the sun already sinking behind a thick blanket of clouds, we were just driving, aimlessly exploring the winding back roads. Maya had a love for all things rustic and strange, a magpie for the macabre. Her eyes suddenly lit up as she pointed to a dirt path branching off the main road. At its entrance was a single hand-painted wooden sign, the letters shaky and faded. It read, "Sister's Harvest. Take one free." An arrow pointed down the unpaved, muddy track that disappeared between a dense woodline and a sprawling, empty field. "Leo, stop," Maya said, her voice filled with a thrill-seeker's excitement. "We have to see what that is. Sister's Harvest. How beautifully creepy." A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. The place felt off. But Maya's enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself turning the car onto the dirt road, the tires spinning in the mud before catching hold. The path was rough, jostling us as we drove deeper into the property. After about a quarter-mile, the path opened into a clearing. Before us stood a dilapidated two-story farmhouse, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin. A sagging porch wrapped around it, and most of the windows were dark, vacant eyes. To the side of the house was a massive field, but it wasn't pumpkins or corn, it was filled with scarecrows. Dozens of them, maybe 60 or 70, were staked throughout the field in a chaotic, haphazard pattern. They were life-sized, dressed in tattered, old-fashioned dresses and bonnets. Each one had a burlap sack for a head, with features crudely drawn in what looked like charcoal. They all had the same unsettling, wide-eyed stare and a stitched, unsmiling line for a mouth. What kind of harvest is this?" Maya whispered, her excitement now tinged with awe. As we stepped out of the car, the front door of the farmhouse creaked open. Two figures emerged from the shadows of the porch. They were twin sisters, elderly, with identical, pale, deeply wrinkled faces and unnervingly large, dark eyes that seemed to absorb the fading light. They wore matching high-collared gray dresses that looked like they belonged to another century. "Welcome," one of them said, her voice a dry, rustling whisper like leaves skittering across pavement. "You've come for the harvest." It wasn't a question. I cleared my throat. Yeah. We saw the sign. Free harvest. Are these scarecrows for sale?" The other twin offered a slow, thin-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. "They are the harvest," she rasped. "You may choose one. Whichever one calls to you, it is our gift." Their demeanor wasn't hostile, but it was utterly devoid of warmth. They were just empty. Maya, ever the brave one, walked toward them. "Thank you. We'll just have a look." We stepped cautiously into the field. The ground was damp and spongy beneath our feet. The air was unnaturally still and a profound silence hung over the place, so heavy I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. Up close, the scarecrows were even more disturbing. Their clothes were stained and rotting, and they emanated a strange, cloying odor, a mix of damp straw, soil, and something faintly, sickeningly sweet. Maya stopped in front of one scarecrow that stood slightly apart from the others. Its dress was a faded calico and its head was tilted at a sorrowful angle. One of its twig-like arms was pointed vaguely in the direction of our car. "Leo, look at this one," Maya said softly. "It looks so lonely, I like it." A primal sense of wrongness washed over me. "Maya, let's go, this place is giving me the creeps." "Just a second," she insisted, reaching out to touch the scarecrow's tattered sleeve. The moment her fingers made contact, a sound broke the silence. From the porch, the twin sisters began to laugh. It was a soft, synchronized, wheezing cackle, a sound like dry twigs snapping. That was it for me. I grabbed Maya's arm. "We're leaving, now!" We hurried back to the car. I glanced back and saw the twins standing motionless on the porch, their dark eyes following us, their faces still fixed in those unnerving, empty smiles. We scrambled into the car and I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. I finally got the engine started and began to execute a three-point turn on the narrow path. Suddenly, a loud bang erupted from the front of the car as if someone had slammed a sledgehammer onto the hood. "Get out!" A furious guttural roar. Standing directly in our path was a large, formidable man. He wore grease-stained overalls and a filthy flannel shirt. His hair was wild, his beard matted, and his eyes were blazing with a terrifying rage. In his hand, he gripped a large, rusty pitchfork. "Thieves!" he screamed, his voice cracking with fury. "What are you doing on my property? You touched them! You touched my girls!" I rolled down the window, my voice trembling. "Hey man, we didn't do anything. Those two women in the house, they invited us in." The man stared at me, his expression shifting from rage to a bewildered fury. "What women? There's no one here but me. You're lying." Maya leaned over, her voice shaking. "No, the twins, the old ladies on the porch. They said we could take one of the scarecrows." The man's face contorted, turning a deep, blotchy red. He raised the pitchfork, its tines glinting in the twilight. "There are no twins here. There's only me and my girls. You defiled this place, now you'll pay." He lunged, aiming the pitchfork at the front tire. I slammed my foot on the accelerator. The car shot forward, spraying mud all over him as he bellowed in impotent rage. I didn't slow down, didn't dare look back until we were safely on the paved road, speeding away from that cursed place. We were both shaking, trying to process what had just happened. "Who were they, Leo?" Maya sobbed. "And who was that man?" "I don't know," I managed to say, but he was convinced he was alone. We drove straight to the Stillwater Creek Police Department, a tiny one-room office. The officer on duty was an old, weary-looking man with a kind face. He listened patiently to our frantic story. When we described the twin sisters, a shadow passed over his features. "Son," he said, his voice low and grave, "the farm you're talking about, it's been abandoned for 50 years. The only person there is old man Silas. He's a recluse. Not dangerous, but unwell. He doesn't let anyone near that land." "But we saw them," I insisted. "The twins, they spoke to us." The officer sighed heavily and pulled a dusty, leather-bound ledger from a shelf. He flipped through the yellowed pages and slid an old black-and-white photograph across the desk toward us. 50 years ago, a family lived on that farm. They had twin daughters, Elspeth and Abigail. One October during the harvest, the girls vanished while playing in the fields. They were never found. Some say they just ran away. Others say the woods took them. The old folks whisper that they still watch over their field, looking for new playmates to join their harvest. The photograph showed two young girls in matching dresses, their faces identical to the women we had seen on the porch. They had the same large dark eyes and the same unnerving, mirthless smiles. A cold dread, sharper than any winter wind, pierced through me. "Silas is their younger brother," the officer continued. "He was just a boy when they disappeared. It broke his mind. Every year around this time he builds those scarecrows. He dresses them in his sister's old clothes. He calls them his girls and protects them fiercely. He thinks he's keeping them safe." We didn't stay in Stillwater Creek another night. We drove home, the silence in the car as heavy as the silence in that field. Even now, years later, when the October air turns crisp, I see that desolate farm, those silent watching scarecrows, and the empty faces of those twin girls. I don't know what we saw that day. Was it a shared hallucination born of a creepy setting and our own fears? Or was it the lingering spirits of two lost girls forever bound to their lonely harvest? And the most terrifying question, the one that still haunts my nightmares, is this: what would have happened if Maya had done more than just touch that lonely scarecrow? What if she had tried to take it with us? My name is Daniel, and I'm a photographer. My work takes me to the forgotten corners of the country where I try to capture the quiet poetry of decay. Last October, I embarked on a personal project I called Harvest's End. The goal was to document the solemn beauty of late autumn in rural America. The stark, harvested fields, the empty roads, and the melancholic grace that settles over everything as the world prepares for winter. This search led me to Blackwood Creek, a small, unincorporated town deep in the Appalachian Hills of West Virginia. It was a place barely on the map, where time seemed to move at a slower, more deliberate pace. The locals were reserved, their curiosity about strangers overshadowed by a quiet suspicion. I checked into the town's only motel, a two-story, slightly run-down establishment managed by an elderly woman. For the first few days, I photographed the surrounding forests and rolling hills, capturing the rust-colored leaves and the ever-present fog that clung to the valleys. But I hadn't found my centerpiece yet, that one singular image that would define the entire project. Then one evening, as I was driving down a deserted back road, I saw it. It was a vast cornfield stretching to the horizon. The harvest was long over, leaving only a sea of brittle brown stalks jutting from the earth like skeletal fingers. But right in the center of that desolate expanse, standing utterly alone, was a scarecrow. It was unlike any I had ever seen. It was massive and crudely constructed, built from thick wooden posts and bundled straw. It wore a long, tattered black duster coat and a wide-brimmed hat that cast a deep shadow over its face. Its arms were unnaturally long, ending in thin, twig-like fingers that seemed to claw at the air. But the most unsettling feature was its head. It was a pale burlap sack with two mismatched, vacant eyes drawn in charcoal. Below them, a jagged, stitched line stretched from one side of the head to the other, less a smile and more a silent, frozen scream. It was a haunting image. I immediately pulled over, grabbed my camera, and started shooting. As the sun began to set, casting long, dramatic shadows across the field, the scarecrow's silhouette seemed to stretch and writhe. The sky exploded in shades of orange and deep purple, and I knew I had found my shot. I named it right then and there, "He Who Waits in the Fields." The next day, I drove by the field again, mostly out of curiosity, wanting to see it in the flat light of midday. As I approached, a strange feeling prickled at the back of my neck. Something was different. I was sure of it. The day before, its head had been tilted slightly to the right. Today, it was facing straight ahead, seemingly staring directly at the road, at me. Its posture felt more rigid, its twig-like fingers curled into tighter fists. I dismissed it as a trick of the mind. The wind, I told myself, or maybe I just hadn't paid close enough attention the day before. I shook my head and drove on. But when I passed by on the third day, the change was undeniable. The hat was now pulled lower, obscuring its charcoal eyes completely. One of its arms, previously hanging limp, was now raised slightly as if in a hesitant wave. This was deeply unsettling. This wasn't the wind. Someone was messing with it. It had to be a local, I reasoned, playing a prank on the out-of-town photographer. That night, I sat in my dimly lit motel room transferring the photos to my laptop. When I got to the images of the scarecrow, I began to examine them closely. The shots from the first evening were magnificent, filled with an ominous atmosphere. But as I zoomed in on one of the close-ups, my breath caught in my throat. Behind the scarecrow, nestled deep within the rows of dead corn stalks, was a shape. It was a shadow, but it didn't belong to the scarecrow. It was the tall, slender silhouette of a figure that had no business being there. It looked as though someone had been standing directly behind the scarecrow, hiding in the dying field, watching me. A chilling sensation washed over me. Did the field have an owner who was watching me? A territorial farmer, maybe? But I had never seen another soul near that place. Suddenly, a faint sound came from my motel room door. Scrape. Scrape. It was the sound of something dry being dragged across the wood. It was so quiet I thought I'd imagined it, but then it came again, a little louder this time. Scrape. 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 My heart began to pound against my ribs. The motel was nearly empty. Who could possibly be at my door at this hour? I held my breath, stood up and crept silently to the door. I peered through the peephole, but the dim, flickering light of the corridor revealed nothing. The hallway was empty. I waited, my ear pressed against the cold wood, but the sound didn't return. I convinced myself it was just an animal or the old building settling. After checking the lock for the third time, I went back to my laptop, but my concentration was shattered. The image of the shadow and the memory of that scraping sound echoed in my mind. An hour later, I gave up on work and decided to turn in. As I walked toward the bed, my eyes fell on the thin gap at the bottom of the door. In the sliver of light from the hallway, I saw something on the worn carpet. It was a small pile of dry, brittle straw and a single desiccated corn husk. It was impossible. How did that get there? My mind went numb with a cold, creeping dread. It was the same kind of straw the scarecrow was made of. Who could have brought it here? Was it the person from the field? Had they followed me back? The next morning, I knew I had to leave. The project no longer mattered. My nerve was gone. I packed my bags in a hurry and went to the front desk to check out. The old woman who ran the motel was there, polishing a pair of glasses. "Leaving so soon, hun?" she asked, her voice raspy. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Work's done." On an impulse, I asked, "That big cornfield at the end of the county road, do you know who owns it?" A strange, guarded look came over her face. "That field. It's been fallow for decades. No one goes near it. Folks around here say it's bad land." "Bad land? What do you mean?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "They say a man took his own life out there a long, long time ago. A farmer who lost everything. He built a scarecrow, dressed it in his own clothes, and then hung himself from the post right inside it. By the time they found him weeks later, the birds had already been at him. They say his spirit never left, that it's bound to that scarecrow, protecting his land." The story sent a wave of ice through my veins. I thanked her and quickly got into my car. I just wanted to get out of that town, to put as many miles as possible between me and Blackwood Creek. But I had to see it one last time. I needed the daylight to prove it was all just a story, a prank. a figment of my imagination. When I arrived at the field, my heart sank into my stomach. In the center of the field where the scarecrow had stood sentinel, there was now nothing but an empty wooden post. The scarecrow was gone. I didn't wait another second. I floored the gas pedal and drove. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I had crossed the state line. It's been years since that true story unfolded. I never published the photos. They remain buried in a folder on an old hard drive. Sometimes on a cold October night, I open them. I look at the picture of the shadow hiding behind the scarecrow, and I feel that same chilling dread. I don't know who was at my door that night. Was it just a local playing a cruel joke? Or was the old woman's story true? Was it the more terrifying spirit of a man bound to a straw effigy following me for trespassing on his eternal rest? And the most ominous question of all, the one that still keeps me awake during the Halloween season, is this: where did the scarecrow go? Is it standing in another field, on another forgotten road, waiting for the next curious traveler? Or is it still out there somewhere, searching for the photographer who disturbed its watch? What would you have done if you found straw outside your door? This is one of those true stories you hear about, the kind that makes the hair on your arm stand up because you know it could happen to anyone. It happened to me my senior year of high school, that age when you feel invincible, when the concept of real danger feels like something that only happens in movies. It was the last week of October. The Halloween season was in full swing, and there was a certain electric energy in the crisp autumn air. My best friend Jake had the house to himself for the weekend. His parents were out of town, and his older sister Emily, who was home from college, was technically the one in charge. Of course, that just meant the house was the designated pre-game and crash pad for our friend group. That Friday night, Jake got a text that a girl from our school, Sarah, was throwing a massive Halloween party just a few blocks away. I wasn't really in a party mood, but Jake was dying to go. He dug up 2 old black hooded cloaks from a costume box in his garage. "Here," he said, tossing one to me. "Instant costume. Now let's go." Sarah's house was a full-blown Halloween spectacle. Fake tombstones littered the lawn, ghostly figures hung from the trees, and jack-o'-lanterns with sinister grins flickered on the porch. Inside, the music was a physical force, a wall of bass you had to push through. The place was packed with at least 100 teenagers in every costume imaginable. Within minutes, I'd lost Jake to the crowd. I found a few of my other friends, and we claimed a corner of the living room, just observing the chaos. Hours passed in a blur of loud music and shouted conversations. Around midnight, a wave of exhaustion hit me. I was done. I navigated through the sweaty, dancing bodies and found Jake in the kitchen, deep in conversation with a girl I vaguely recognized. "Hey man, I'm heading back to your place to crash," I told him, trying not to interrupt too much. He nodded, barely looking away from the girl. "Sounds good, I'll be back in a bit." As I turned to leave, the girl, I think her name was Jessica, spoke up. "Oh hey, before you go, could you be a lifesaver and grab some more drinks from the basement? We're totally out." Feeling awkward for breaking their flow, I agreed. It was the least I could do. The basement door was at the back of the kitchen, partially hidden behind a rack of coats. I opened it to a flight of steep wooden stairs illuminated by a single bare red light bulb that cast everything in a hellish glow. As I descended, the air grew cold and damp, smelling of earth and mildew. The basement was huge and cluttered, a chaotic mix of old furniture, boxes of forgotten belongings, and a makeshift lounge area with a worn-out couch and a small TV. In the far corner, a mini-fridge hummed quietly. I had just pulled the fridge door open when a voice from the shadows behind me made me jump out of my skin. "Looking for something?" I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs. A tall figure stepped out of the darkness and into the dim red light. He was a man, probably in his mid-30s, wearing a cheap, unsettling clown mask. It wasn't a funny, cartoonish clown face. It was one of those uncanny valley masks with a grotesquely wide, fixed smile and dead black eye holes. He was dressed in simple, dark clothes. "Jesus, you scared me," I said, my voice shaky. A low, muffled chuckle came from behind the mask. "Sorry about that. I'm Mark, the host's older brother, just escaping the noise." His presence was immediately and intensely unsettling. Why was a grown man hiding alone in the dark basement of a high school party? His voice was calm, almost gentle, but something about it set off every alarm bell in my head. It felt predatory. "Just grabbing some drinks," I said quickly, pulling a few cans from the fridge. He took a slow step toward me. "Interesting costume," he said, gesturing to my simple cloak. "Simple, mysterious." "Thanks," I mumbled, turning and heading straight for the stairs. I needed to get out of there. His vibe was all wrong. "Nice meeting you," he called after me, his voice laced with a strange sing-song quality that made my skin crawl. I hurried upstairs, handed the drinks to Jessica, gave Jake a quick wave, and left the party. The cold night air was a relief, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. As I walked the 5 minutes back to Jake's house, my mind kept replaying the encounter. The mask, the voice, the way he just stood there in the dark. It was an ominous feeling I couldn't shake. When I got to Jake's, the house was completely dark. Emily's car was gone, which meant I was totally alone. I let myself in, didn't bother with the lights, and went straight down to their finished basement, which had a comfortable couch and a big screen TV. It was my usual crash spot. I threw off my cloak, collapsed onto the couch, and was asleep almost instantly. I don't know how long I was out, but I was jolted awake by a sharp, sudden noise from upstairs. Thud. It came from the main floor, directly above me. It sounded like something heavy had been dropped. I sat bolt upright, my heart racing. I listened, holding my breath, but was met with complete silence. I told myself I was dreaming, that it was just the house settling. I tried to lie back down, but sleep was now impossible. Then I heard it. Creak. Creak. The sound of the floorboards above me groaning under the weight of slow, deliberate footsteps. It wasn't Jake's hurried tread or Emily's lighter step. This was heavy, careful, calculated. My blood ran cold. I fumbled for my phone, my hands trembling, and sent a text to Jake. "You home?" No reply. The creaking moved across the floor toward the kitchen, toward the basement door. Then came the sound that made my soul freeze. The soft, metallic click of the basement doorknob turning. I dove off the couch and scrambled behind it, pressing myself into the shadows. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I watched the sliver of light at the top of the stairs widen as the door swung open. A silhouette appeared, and then a figure began to descend. It was Mark. He was still wearing the clown mask. He reached the bottom of the stairs and stood perfectly still in the middle of the room, his head slowly scanning the darkness. He was looking for something. For me. He knew I was there. His silence was more terrifying than any scream. He just stood there, breathing, waiting. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't see me. Every second stretched into an eternity. Then he took a step, and another, directly toward the couch I was hiding behind. I knew I had only seconds. As he rounded the edge of the couch, I bolted. I sprinted to the far side of the basement, where a small, dark storage closet was built under the stairs. I threw myself inside, slammed the door shut, and braced my body against it. A moment later, the door shuddered as he threw his weight against it from the other side. "I know you're in there," came his calm, chilling voice. "Come on out, let's just talk." With shaking hands, I dialed 911. I whispered to the operator, giving them the address and telling them there was an intruder in the house who might be armed. The door shuddered again, more violently this time. The wood groaned. "You shouldn't have run," he said, a new edge of anger in his voice. I clutched the phone to my chest, waiting, not knowing how long the flimsy closet door would hold. Then suddenly silence. No more pushing, no footsteps, nothing. Had he given up? Or was he waiting right outside the door, listening? Minutes that felt like an eternity later, I heard muffled shouts from upstairs. "Sheriff's Department! Anyone in the house?" I found my voice and screamed, "I'm in the basement, in the closet!" Soon 2 deputies were coming down the stairs, guns drawn. I shakily opened the door and stumbled out. "He was right here," I stammered. They swept the basement, but he was gone, vanished. One deputy stayed with me while the other went back upstairs. A few minutes later, his radio crackled to life. "We got him. Upstairs, master bedroom." What they told me next haunts me to this day. Just as the police were arriving, Emily had gotten home. She was about to walk into her bedroom when the deputies intercepted her. When they searched her room, they found Mark hiding under her bed. He was lying perfectly still in the dark, waiting. What was his plan? That remains the most horrifying mystery. The police investigation revealed he wasn't Sarah's brother. No one at the party knew who he was or how he got there. Why did he follow me? Was I his intended target, or was I just the means to get inside the house, with Emily being his real goal all along? This unreal event is a chilling reminder that the most terrifying monsters aren't ghosts or demons. They're the people who walk among us, hiding their true dark intentions behind a smile, or in this case, a clown mask. What would you do if you realized the person you just met at a party was hiding under your bed? This is one of those true stories that burrows under your skin, a chilling reminder of how little we know about the people we meet, especially when they're hiding behind a mask. This real event happened to me during my sophomore year of college on the last night of October, so Halloween. It left a haunting impression on me that I've never been able to shake. My best friend and roommate Laura and I went to a massive Halloween party being held in a converted warehouse in the city's old industrial district. It was hosted by a group of art students, so the atmosphere was incredibly creative and eerie. Fog machines filled the cavernous space. Strange sculptures lurked in shadowy corners, and the music was a throbbing physical presence. The one rule of the party was that everyone had to wear a mask. Laura wore an elaborate feathered Venetian mask, while I opted for something simpler, a sleek, glossy black mask that covered the top half of my face. The crowd was a sea of anonymous figures, ghouls, movie villains, and abstract horrors I couldn't even name. A few hours in, overwhelmed by the noise and the crowd, I retreated to a quieter corner near a loading bay door that had been left slightly ajar, letting in the crisp night air. That's where I met him. He stood apart from everyone else, and the stark simplicity of his costume is what caught my eye. He was dressed in all black, but his face was covered by a plain white plastic mask. It was completely featureless. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a smooth, blank oval. It was deeply unsettling. "That's a minimalist approach to Halloween," I said, trying to sound casual. He turned his head toward me, his movements slow and deliberate. "Sometimes the most terrifying thing is having no face at all," he replied. His voice was muffled by the mask, but it was deep and articulate with a magnetic quality. We started talking. He said his name was Alex. He was incredibly intelligent and charismatic, and we fell into a deep conversation about art, philosophy, and the masks people wear every day. There was a strange, captivating pull to his quiet confidence and his air of mystery. I found myself drawn to him even though I couldn't see his face. As the hours passed, the party began to wind down. Laura found me announcing she'd called a ride share. "Can I give you a ride home?" Alex offered. "My car is just outside." For a fleeting moment I considered it, but a small instinctual voice in the back of my mind held me back. I knew nothing about him, not even what he looked like. "Thanks, but my friend's waiting," I said with a polite smile. "Another time then," he said. There was no disappointment in his voice, just a strange, flat finality. I joined Laura and we headed back to our apartment. During the ride, I couldn't stop thinking about Alex. Had I made a mistake by not going with him? He was so fascinating. "Who was the guy in the white mask?" Laura asked. "You two looked pretty intense." "I don't know," I admitted. "His name's Alex. He was a little weird, but in a good way." We got back to our third-floor apartment around 2 a.m. The building was old but secure. We changed out of our costumes and were getting ready for bed, exhausted from the night. I had just climbed into bed when we heard a knock at the door. Knock. 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 It was a soft but firm, deliberate sound. Laura and I looked at each other. "Who could that be at this hour?" she whispered. My heart started to pound. My mind immediately jumped to Alex, but that was impossible. How could he possibly know where we lived? "Probably just someone on the wrong floor," I said, trying to reassure myself. The knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. I motioned for Laura to be quiet and tiptoed to the door. Our apartment had an old-fashioned peephole. With a trembling hand, I raised the metal cover and looked out. In the dim, flickering light of the hallway, a figure stood there. He was dressed in black, and on his face was the same plain, white, featureless mask. It was Alex. The air left my lungs. It couldn't be. Had he followed us? I was frozen, staring at the blank oval where his face should be. He stood perfectly still, facing my door, as if he knew I was on the other side, watching him. His silent, motionless presence was more terrifying than any monster. "Who is it?" Laura mouthed from across the room. "It's him," I whispered back, my voice shaking. "The guy from the party. The one with the white mask." The color drained from Laura's face. "Don't you dare open that door!" The knock came a third time, sharp and demanding. I found my voice, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Who is it? We're not expecting anyone." There was a long pause. Then his calm, deep voice drifted through the door. "I just wanted to make sure you got home safe." There was no concern in his tone. It was flat, possessive, and deeply ominous. It felt like a threat. "We're fine, thank you. You can go now," I said, struggling to keep my voice from breaking. After another moment of silence, he replied, "All right, good night then." I stayed glued to the peephole, watching as he turned and walked silently down the hall, his movements still unnervingly graceful. He didn't look back. Even after he disappeared down the stairwell, I couldn't bring myself to move away from the door. Neither of us slept that night. Every creak of the old building made us jump. We considered calling the police, but what would we say? That a guy from a party had knocked on our door? They would have dismissed it as a harmless, if creepy, gesture. The next day, we were exhausted and on edge. We tried to forget about it, to rationalize it. In the afternoon, I was scrolling through a local news site when a headline caught my eye. "College student missing after downtown. Halloween party." My blood ran cold. The article said a local university student, Alex Turner, had been reported missing by his roommates. He was last seen leaving the warehouse party late last night. Police had located his car a few blocks from the venue. The car was locked and nothing appeared to be stolen. But they had found one item left behind. On the driver's seat was a plain white, featureless mask. I dropped my phone. The article included a photo of the missing student, Alex Turner. He was a normal-looking, smiling young man. If the real Alex Turner's car and mask had been found by the police, then who was the man at our door? That question echoes in my mind to this day. Who was the person who had stolen Alex's identity for the night? Was he connected to the real Alex's disappearance? Had he chosen me as his next target? What would have happened to me if I had accepted his offer for a ride? This on a real event came out as a chilling reminder that during the Halloween season, some masks aren't just costumes. They're an opportunity for those who hunt in the dark to hide their true selves behind a blank white canvas. Who was at the door that night? It's a question I'm not sure I ever want to know the answer to. This is one of those true stories that serves as a stark reminder of how thin the veil of civilization is and how vulnerable you become the moment you step outside of it. This real event happened to my wife Emma and me last October. We were looking for a quiet escape into nature, a break from the city noise, but that trip devolved into a haunting experience that has stayed with us ever since. We're both avid hikers. For our anniversary, we booked a secluded cabin deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, near a popular hiking destination called the Whispering Pines Trail. The cabin was an Airbnb set far back from any main road, completely isolated in a dense forest. In the photos, it looked like a dream, a cozy rustic cabin with nothing but trees and silence for miles. The owner, a woman named Carol, was friendly and responsive over the app. She told us the key would be in a coded lockbox, and that the cabin was fully stocked. "You won't have to see another soul if you don't want to," she wrote. At the time, that sounded like heaven. When we arrived, the place was even more remote than we'd imagined. The nearest neighbor was miles away. It was just us and the vast silent woods painted in the fiery colors of autumn. It felt like the perfect escape. The next morning, we set out to hike the Whispering Pines Trail, a moderately difficult path that led to a scenic waterfall. The weather was perfect, crisp and clear, with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves in the air. The trail was quiet, with only a few other hikers passing us along the way. After about 2 hours, we reached the waterfall and found a large, sun-drenched rock to sit on, enjoying the sound of the cascading water and the peaceful solitude. We'd been there for maybe half an hour when I got the distinct prickling feeling of being watched. I turned and scanned the trail behind us. There, standing in the shadows of the trees, was a woman. She was middle-aged, dressed in faded, worn-out clothing that seemed to blend in with the forest. She was standing perfectly still, her gaze fixed on us. The moment my eyes met hers, she quickly looked away, feigning interest in a nearby tree as if she hadn't wanted to be caught staring. Her behavior was immediately unsettling. I nudged Emma, who turned to look as well. The woman was still there, now studying her own worn-out boots. "That's weird," Emma whispered. We tried to ignore her, but the peaceful atmosphere was shattered. A few minutes later, the woman made a strange throat-clearing sound and said, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Her voice was low and raspy. "Yeah, it is," I replied hesitantly. She took a few steps toward us, but kept a careful distance. "You folks aren't from around here?" It wasn't a question. "No, just visiting for the week," I said. She offered a strange, toothless smile. "Good place for it. Real quiet, real isolated." She drew out the word isolated with an odd emphasis. "Where are you staying?" The question felt too personal, too direct. "Oh, just in a cabin nearby," I answered vaguely. "Nice," she said, her eyes still scanning us with an unnerving intensity. "The woods get different at night, a lot of strange sounds." This didn't feel like a friendly chat. It felt like an ominous warning. A sense of unease washed over both of us. "Well, we should probably head back," Emma said, standing up. "Nice meeting you," we said in unison and started back down the trail. A few minutes into our descent, I glanced over my shoulder. The woman was following us, maintaining a distance of about 50 yards. She wasn't getting closer, but she wasn't falling behind either. "She's following us," I said to Emma, my voice tight with anxiety. We picked up our pace. So did she. We stopped, pretending to admire a view, hoping she would pass us. She stopped too, just standing there, watching. It was a terrifying, silent game of cat and mouse. Finally, we broke into a jog, then a run. We practically flew down the rest of the trail, dodging roots and rocks, not daring to look back. When we reached the parking lot, we jumped into our car and sped back toward the cabin, our hearts pounding. That night, we were both on edge. We scrapped our plans to go into the nearby town for dinner and decided to lock ourselves in. We double-checked every door and window. As darkness fell, the sounds of the forest seemed to amplify, every snap of a twig or hoot of an owl sounding like a threat. We put on a movie, but neither of us could focus. Around 10 p.m., there was a knock at the front door. Knock, knock, knock. It was a soft, hesitant sound. We both froze. Who could possibly be out here at this hour? "Who is it?" Emma whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Don't say anything," I mouthed back. "Don't open it." The knock came again, a little louder this time. Then we heard the same raspy voice from the trail. "Hello? Is anyone in there? I need help. My car broke down up the road." It was her. It was impossible. How did she know we were here? "Don't fall for it," I whispered to Emma. "It's a trap." We stayed silent. After a moment, the voice came again, this time from right outside the living room window. "Please, it's cold and dark out here." Her voice was no longer pleading, it was demanding. Then we heard the sickening sound of the window latch being jiggled. Someone was trying to get in. I immediately dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely press the numbers. I whispered our location to the operator, telling her that people were trying to break into our cabin. She said they would dispatch a unit, but warned that we were in a remote area and it could take a while. Just then, Emma gasped and pointed to the window on the other side of the room. Through the darkness, we could see another figure, a tall, broad silhouette. It was a man. We knew then that she wasn't alone. This was a planned attack. The woman was the bait, a lure to get us to open the door. They had targeted us on the trail, seeing two women alone. Now the knocking started from all sides, the front door, the back door, the windows. They were surrounding us. We ran into the master bathroom, the only room with no windows, and locked the door. We huddled together on the cold tile floor, listening to the sounds of them trying to force their way into our sanctuary. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything went silent. The knocking stopped. The voices ceased. The silence was somehow more terrifying than the noise. Had they given up? Or were they just waiting? We stayed in that bathroom for what felt like an eternity. After about 20 minutes of absolute silence, we heard the faint, distant wail of a siren. It was the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. When the police arrived, they searched the entire property and the surrounding woods. They found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, no one. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. We refused to spend another second in that cabin. The officers stayed with us while we frantically packed our belongings, and then they escorted us to the nearest motel. The next morning, we cut our trip short and drove straight home. We never found out who those people were or what they wanted. Were they planning to rob us, or was their intent something far more sinister? How did that woman find our isolated cabin? This real event is a terrifying reminder of how vulnerable you can be when you're truly alone. We learned a hard lesson that day about always being aware of your surroundings. What would you do if you were trapped in a secluded cabin with strangers trying to get in? It's a question I hope I never have to answer for real. This is one of those true stories, that reminds you that some things are better left in the past, buried and forgotten. It began as a simple souvenir from a trip and spiraled into a haunting experience that forced me to question if certain doors, once opened, can ever truly be closed. This real event took place last October, and the memory of it still sends a cold dread through my veins. My girlfriend Anna is from a small, isolated town in Vermont called Havenwood. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other's business, a town where old traditions die hard. Every year in October, the town hosts its annual Harvest Festival, a classic old-fashioned affair with pumpkin carving contests, homemade pies, and local bands playing on a makeshift stage. As a city guy, I was looking forward to experiencing this slice of quaint small-town life. The festival was charming, but one particular booth caught my attention. In the center of the town square was a long, rickety table with a hand-painted banner that read, "Havenwood's Lost and Found." This wasn't your typical lost and found. Alongside the expected keys and sunglasses were old, forgotten objects that townsfolk had found throughout the year. A weathered leather baseball, a single child-sized boot, a rusted set of keys to a long-gone automobile, and faded photographs of families no one could identify. It was a quirky town tradition, a museum of forgotten moments. Behind the table sat Mr. Abernathy, the town's unofficial historian, an elderly man with a knowing twinkle in his eye. As I scanned the collection of oddities, my eyes locked onto one item. It was a small, intricately carved wooden music box. It was clearly antique, with delicate vines and leaves etched into the dark wood. Despite its age, it was in pristine condition, free of dust as if it had been recently polished. "That's beautiful," I remarked to Mr. Abernathy. He looked up at me, a strange, cryptic smile playing on his lips. "Isn't it? That one turns up every few years. Someone always finds it out in the woods." He put a peculiar emphasis on the word finds. "Can I see it?" I asked. He nodded. I picked up the music box. It felt cool and smooth in my hands. I tried to open the lid, but it was latched shut. On the bottom was a small winding key. I turned it, expecting a melody, but there was only silence. It was broken. "That's a shame," I said, disappointed. "Some things are best left quiet," Mr. Abernathy said softly. He then looked me directly in the eye. "A word of advice, son? Some things that are lost are meant to stay that way. They have a way of finding their own place." At the time, I brushed it off as the ramblings of an old man fond of local folklore. "Does it belong to anyone?" I asked. "Not anymore," he replied. "It's free to whoever wants it." I turned to Anna. "Should I take it? I could try to fix it. It would look great on your dresser." Anna shrugged, a little hesitantly. "If you want it. It's a little unsettling, though." I decided to take it. As we walked away, I glanced back and saw Mr. Abernathy watching me, his expression a mixture of pity and concern. That night, staying at Anna's parents' house, I placed the music box on the nightstand beside the bed and promptly forgot about it. I was woken in the dead of night by a soft, ethereal melody. It was a lullaby, a simple but profoundly sad tune I had never heard before. The sound was coming from the music box. I sat bolt upright. Anna was fast asleep beside me. The room was pitch black, save for the pale moonlight filtering through the window. The music box was playing. I reached for it, my hand trembling. The lid was still closed. The music seemed to be emanating from the wood itself, as if the box itself were singing. It was impossible. I had tested it myself. It was broken. The moment my fingers touched the wood, the music stopped. My heart was hammering in my chest. I thought about waking Anna, but decided against it. I didn't want to frighten her. I rationalized it as some old faulty mechanism that had suddenly sprung to life. I tucked the box away in a drawer and tried to go back to sleep, but my mind was racing. The next day, we drove back to our apartment in the city. I placed the music box on a bookshelf in the living room, treating it as a curious decoration. I tried to push the strange incident from my mind, but the odd occurrences had only just begun. A few days later, while I was home alone, I heard the faint sound of a child's giggle. It was so light and airy that I initially dismissed it as coming from a neighbor's apartment. But when I strained to listen, it sounded like it was coming from inside my own living room. One evening, I walked out of the kitchen to find a trail of small, damp footprints on the hardwood floor. They were tiny, like those of a barefoot child who had just walked through mud. I searched the entire apartment, my heart pounding. No one was there. 10 minutes later, when I went back to look, the footprints were gone. This was becoming truly terrifying. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that it had all started when I brought that music box home. I finally broke down and told Anna everything. She was skeptical at first, but when she saw the genuine fear in my eyes, she grew serious. "I'm going to call my grandmother," she said. "She knows all the old stories about Havenwood." I watched her face as she spoke on the phone, saw her expression shift from curiosity to concern and finally to sheer horror. When she hung up, her face was pale. "Chris," she said, her voice trembling, "you need to get rid of that music box right now." "Why? What's wrong?" I demanded. "My grandmother told me an old story," she began. "A local legend. Nearly a century ago, a little girl named Lily lived in Havenwood. She vanished during the harvest festival while playing in the woods. The whole town searched, but she was never found. All she had with her was a wooden music box, one her father had carved for her." She took a shaky breath. "The story goes that her spirit is tied to the box. She's lost and she's always looking for a new home. Every few years, someone finds the box and she follows them. She wants a new family." "It's just a story, Anna," I said, though a cold dread was spreading through me. "No, Chris," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "Grandma said the last time this happened, about 30 years ago, a young couple took the box. A week later, they disappeared from their home, vanished without a trace. Everything in their house was untouched except for one thing. The music box," I whispered. She nodded. The giggling, the footprints, they were a warning. "Okay," I said, my voice hoarse. "We'll throw it out, right now." I walked over to the bookshelf. The music box was gone. "Where is it?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. "I left it right here." We tore the apartment apart. We checked every drawer, every closet, every dark corner. It had vanished as if it had never been there at all. That night, sleep was impossible. We left all the lights on and sat huddled together on the couch. Around 3 a.m. and we heard it again, the lullaby. But this time it wasn't coming from a music box. It was coming from inside our bedroom. It was the soft humming voice of a child emanating from the darkest corner of the room. We looked at each other, a shared, unspeakable terror in our eyes. We were not alone. We fled the apartment that night and stayed in a hotel. We only went back the next day to grab our most essential belongings. We broke our lease and found a new place to live, leaving most of our furniture behind. I don't know what happened to the music box. Is it still in that apartment waiting for the next tenants? Or did it find its way back to the woods of Havenwood, waiting for someone else to find it? And the most ominous question of all, the one that still haunts me, is this: Where is the music box now, and who or what did we bring into our home? Because sometimes when the night is very quiet, I think I can still hear a faint, sad lullaby on the edge of my hearing. A ghostly melody reminding me that some things once found can never truly be lost again. This is a poor, true story, or at least it's true to me. It's an experience that my wife Chloe and I shared, and it's the reason we don't go to remote, picturesque places anymore, especially not during the Kofom autumn season. Some memories fade, but this one feels branded onto my mind. A constant, haunting reminder that sometimes when you feel like you're being watched, you are. It was mid-October on our 5th wedding anniversary. We wanted to do something simple and classic to celebrate. Something that felt like it was straight out of a postcard. We decided on a weekend trip to the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, renting a small cabin and planning a day of apple picking. Online, we found a place called Black Creek Orchard, a supposedly family-run farm deep in the countryside, miles from any major town. The reviews praised its rustic charm and quiet, sprawling grounds. It sounded perfect. When we arrived, the place was beautiful but also eerily still. A long gravel road led us to a small, weathered barn where a simple, hand-painted sign read, "You pick apples." There were only a couple of other cars in the makeshift parking lot. The air was crisp and smelled of damp earth and ripe fruit. It was almost too quiet. There was no music, no chatter of families, just the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. An elderly woman with kind, tired eyes sat at a small wooden stand near the entrance. She gave us 2 wicker baskets and pointed us toward the orchard. "Take your time," she said with a warm smile. "The northern spies are particularly good this year. Just head to the back rows." Chloe and I walked hand in hand into the orchard. The rows of apple trees seemed to stretch on forever, creating long, cathedral-like aisles. For the first hour, it was idyllic. We laughed, picked apples, and took photos. The world felt peaceful, just the 2 of us in this vast, quiet space. It was Chloe who felt it first. "Do you get the feeling we're being watched?" she asked, her voice a little hushed. I looked around. The orchard was empty as far as I could see. "It's probably just one of the farm hands," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "It's a big place. Someone's got to be working here." She nodded, but her shoulders remained tense. A few minutes later, she grabbed my arm. "There," she whispered, pointing toward the far end of a row several hundred feet away. "I just saw someone." I squinted, trying to see what she was pointing at. For a split second, I caught a flicker of movement, a tall, thin figure partially obscured by the dense foliage of a tree. It was just a shape, really, dark against the bright autumn leaves. Then it was gone. "See? Just a worker," I said, though a small, unsettling feeling began to creep into my own mind. The figure hadn't been moving like someone working. It had been standing perfectly still. We tried to shake it off and continued picking apples, moving deeper into the orchard. But the feeling of being observed didn't go away. It intensified. Every few minutes, one of us would catch another fleeting glimpse of the figure, always in the distance, always half hidden. It seemed to be shadowing us, moving silently from row to row, keeping a constant, unnerving distance. It never got closer, but it was always there. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long, distorted shadows across the orchard. The atmosphere shifted from peaceful to ominous. The silence no longer felt serene. It felt heavy, watchful. "I've had enough," Chloe said, her voice firm. "I want to leave. Now." I didn't argue. The charm of the place had completely evaporated, replaced by a growing sense of dread. We turned and started walking back toward the entrance, our baskets only half full. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, scanning the rows of trees. I saw the figure one last time, standing at the edge of the woods that bordered the orchard. It was just a silhouette against the setting sun, tall and gaunt, its posture rigid. It was watching us leave. When we got back to the checkout stand, the old woman was still there, packing up for the day. We paid for our apples, and as she handed us our change, I decided to mention it, hoping she could offer a simple, logical explanation. "You guys have a pretty creepy farmhand working here," I said, forcing a light-hearted chuckle. The woman's smile vanished. Her face went pale, and the warmth in her eyes was replaced by a look of profound sadness and fear. What did he look like?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Tall, really thin," Chloe answered. "He was wearing dark, old-fashioned clothes and a wide-brimmed hat. He was just standing out in the back rows watching us." The woman closed her eyes for a moment, and a single tear traced a path down her wrinkled cheek. She took a shaky breath before speaking. That was my husband, Arthur," she said softly. "He passed away last October, right out there in that orchard. He had a heart attack while tending to his trees." My blood ran cold. Chloe and I exchanged a horrified glance. "He loved this land more than anything," she continued, her voice trembling. "He was fiercely protective of it. After he died, a few visitors mentioned strange things, feeling watched, seeing someone in the distance. I thought he had finally found peace. I haven't heard any stories for months." We were speechless. We mumbled our condolences, grabbed our apples, and hurried to our car, leaving the grieving woman alone with her ghosts. As I pulled onto the gravel road to leave, I glanced in my rearview mirror. In the rapidly fading light, I could see the entrance to the orchard. And standing there at the edge of the road was a tall, thin figure in a wide-brimmed hat. It was standing perfectly still, watching our car drive away until we turned a corner and it was gone from sight. We drove back to our cabin in complete silence, the more terrifying reality of what we had experienced settling in. We didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle of leaves outside sent a jolt of fear through us. The story should end there. It would be a creepy but contained ghost story, but it doesn't. The next morning we packed up, eager to leave that place behind. As I was loading our bags into the car, I noticed something on the ground near the driver's side door. It was a single, perfect northern spy apple. It hadn't been there the night before. We had left all of our apples still in their baskets inside the cabin. This one was just sitting there on the damp ground, as if it had been placed there as a gift. Or a warning. We never figured out what we truly saw that day. Was it the restless, protective spirit of a farmer still watching over his land? That's the story I tell myself to make it feel manageable. But there's another, more disturbing possibility that lingers in the back of my mind. The old woman said she hadn't heard any stories for months. What if the thing we saw wasn't her husband? What if it was something else entirely, something that has walked the rows of that orchard for a long, long time, and the old woman's grief simply gave it a convenient face? What would you do if you realized the person you thought was an employee was actually something else? It's a question that haunts me because in that quiet, beautiful orchard, we felt like we had stumbled into a story that was much older and much darker than we could ever comprehend. Dear all, it's a real event that happened to me a few years ago. A story that starts with something as mundane as shopping for a costume and ends with the kind of haunting realization that makes you question the safety of every shadow, every quiet room, every face in a crowd. It was the day before Halloween, a cold and rainy October's afternoon. I was a college student at the time, and like a typical procrastinator, I had waited until the last possible minute to find a costume for a party that night. All the big chain stores were picked over, left with nothing but sad-looking accessories and costumes in the wrong sizes. Frustrated, I was driving through a dreary, half-abandoned part of town when I saw it. A small hand-painted sign that read, "Halloween Pop-Up, Open Late." It was stuck in the window of a dusty storefront in a nearly deserted strip mall. A sense of relief washed over me. I pulled into the empty parking lot, the tires crunching on loose gravel. The store had no flashy name, just blacked-out windows with the single, crudely painted sign. It looked temporary and a little sketchy, but I was desperate. When I pushed open the glass door, a small bell chimed weakly. The air inside was thick with the smell of dust, old fabric, and something else. Something faintly sweet and chemical, like old perfume. The shop was a chaotic maze of clothing racks, overflowing bins and shelves piled high with masks, wigs, and props. The only light came from a few flickering fluorescent bulbs overhead, casting long, dancing shadows. It was the kind of place that felt like it had existed for 100 years, not just for the Halloween season. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the cluttered space. No answer. I figured the owner was probably in a back room. I started to browse, navigating the narrow aisles. The collection was bizarre, not the usual packaged costumes, but authentic-looking theatrical outfits, vintage dresses, and strange handmade masks with unsettlingly human-like expressions. As I moved deeper into the store, I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I turned and scanned the shop. It was empty. Then I saw him. In the far back corner, almost hidden behind a rack of heavy velvet cloaks, stood a single mannequin. It was unnervingly realistic, posed in a stiff, formal stance. It was dressed as a classic, silent film-era vampire, a high-collared tuxedo, a sweeping black cape, and perfectly coiffed, jet-black hair. Its skin was a flawless, waxy white, and its lips were painted a dramatic blood red. But it was the eyes that were the most unsettling. They were glass, painted with an incredible level of detail, and they seemed to be staring directly at me. I tried to shake off the creepy feeling. It was a costume shop, after all. It was supposed to be spooky. I continued my search and finally found what I was looking for. A simple, elegant witch's hat and a long black lace dress that looked like it was from the 1920s. I carried my finds to the front counter, a dusty wooden desk near the entrance. There was still no one there. An old-fashioned cash register sat on the counter, its drawer slightly ajar. "Hello? Is anyone here?" I called out again, a little louder this time. Only silence answered. I waited for a few minutes, growing more annoyed. I was in a hurry. I glanced at the price tags. The total was $40. I had the exact amount in cash. "I'll just leave the money on the counter," I thought. It seemed a little weird, but I didn't want to leave empty-handed. I placed the two $20 bills on the counter, weighting them down with a small, skull-shaped paperweight. As I turned to leave, I instinctively glanced back toward the corner where the mannequin stood. My heart stopped. Its head was now turned slightly, angled directly toward me. I froze, my hand on the doorknob. It was impossible. I was just tired, my mind playing tricks on me in the dim, flickering light. That had to be it. I had imagined it. I didn't wait to find out. I pushed the door open and practically ran to my car, not looking back. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the ominous feeling that had settled over me. The image of the mannequin's turned head was burned into my mind. Later that night, I was in my second-floor apartment getting ready for the party. I had the radio on, trying to create a cheerful, festive mood, but the memory of the creepy shop lingered. As I was doing my makeup, I heard a faint sound from the window. Scrape. Scrape. It was a light, rhythmic scratching against the glass. I muted the radio and listened. Silence. It was probably just a tree branch, I told myself, even though there were no trees tall enough to reach my window. I cautiously peeked through the blinds. The street below was empty, bathed in the orange glow of the streetlights. There was nothing there. I finished getting ready, the witch's hat and lace dress fitting perfectly. But my excitement for the party was gone, replaced by a gnawing anxiety. As I was about to leave, I grabbed my keys and opened my apartment door. I lived at the end of a long outdoor corridor. As I stepped out and locked the door behind me, I glanced down toward the street, and I saw him. Standing directly across the street under the sickly orange glow of a streetlight was a tall, thin man. He was wearing a long, sweeping black cape and a tuxedo. His face was unnaturally pale and his hair was jet black. He was standing perfectly, unnaturally still, his posture rigid and formal. Just like the mannequin, my blood turned to ice. He was just standing there, staring up at my apartment building. At my apartment. As I watched, frozen in horror, he slowly, deliberately raised one hand and gave a small, almost imperceptible wave. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The store. It had been empty. There was no shopkeeper. The mannequin was the shopkeeper. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I scrambled back inside my apartment, slammed the door, and locked the deadbolt. My hands shaking so violently I could barely fit the key in the lock. I ran to the window and peeked through the blinds again. He was gone. The space under the streetlight was empty. I immediately called 911. I know I sounded hysterical, babbling about a costume shop and a mannequin that had followed me home. The dispatcher was patient but skeptical. She promised to send a patrol car to check out the strip mall. About an hour later, an officer called me back. "Ma'am," he said, his voice tired. "We went to the location you described. There's no costume shop there. The storefront is empty, has been for years, according to the property owner next door." "No, that's impossible," I insisted. "I was just there. I bought a costume." "There's nothing there, ma'am," he repeated, a hint of annoyance in his voice. "No signs, no merchandise, just an empty, dusty room." After I hung up, I stood in the middle of my living room, the lace dress feeling like a shroud around me. Was I going crazy? Had I imagined the whole thing? But the dress and the hat were real. They were lying on my bed. I never went to the party. I didn't sleep for days. The story ends there, but the questions have haunted me ever since. Who was that man? What was that place? Was it a store at all, or something else? A trap? How many other customers had he helped before me? How did he know where I lived? Was he just a man playing a terrifying prank? Or was he something else entirely, something not quite human, hiding in plain sight during the one time of year when monsters are allowed to walk the streets? I threw the costume away, but I can't throw away the memory. Sometimes when I'm alone at night, I think I hear a faint scratching at my window, and I'm left with one final chilling question. What would you do if you realized the man in the store was never a man at all? Technology is supposed to make our lives easier, but what happens when that same technology opens a door to a nightmare? This is one of those true stories that serves as a chilling reminder that some places never forget their dark history. This real event happened to me last October, and it left such a haunting mark on my psyche that now, even in a crowded room, I sometimes feel utterly alone. My best friend Sam, his younger sister Maya, and I went to the annual Halloween seasoned event at a place called Blackwood Farms. Its main attraction was a massive corn maze that became notoriously spooky after dark for their flashlight fright night. This year, they had introduced a new high-tech feature to prevent people from getting lost, a smartphone app called MazeLink. It used GPS to show you and your group on a map of the maze. Its coolest feature was something called voice drops. You could record a short 5-second voice message that would drop at your location on the map for your group to hear. It seemed like a fun, practical way to stay connected. We were all excited. The night was young, the air was crisp, and we were armed with nothing but our flashlights. Inside the maze, the cornstalks were so tall they blotted out the sky, creating a claustrophobic tunnel-like effect. The sounds of laughter and screams echoed from all around. For the first half hour, we stuck together, jumping out at each other and laughing. Then at a fork in the path, Sam and Maya decided to chase after one of the costumed scarers, and I took a wrong turn. When I looked back, they were gone. "No problem," I muttered to myself, pulling out my phone and opening the MazeLink app. I could see their icons on the map a few hundred yards away. I hit the voice drop button. "Hey guys, where are you? I think I'm lost." A few seconds later, a notification popped up. It was Sam's voice, perfectly clear. "We're close, man, just keep heading straight." I followed his directions, walking deeper into the maze. Every few minutes I'd send a voice drop and they'd reply. But then things started to get weird. The next message was from Maya. "Hurry up, Leo," she said, but her voice had a strange, nervous edge to it that wasn't there before. Behind her words, I could hear a faint rustling sound like someone walking through dry leaves. I dismissed it as the wind. I kept walking, but a sense of unease began to creep in. I sent another voice drop. "I think I'm going the wrong way." Sam's reply was instant, but his voice was distorted now, high-pitched and frantic. No, come this way, we're right here." The rustling sound behind his voice was louder now, more distinct. It was an unsettling sound. My heart began to pound. I looked at the map. Their icons were still ahead, but they were in a section of the maze marked as undeveloped. It was an area with no lights, no actors, no designated path. "What are you guys doing over there?" I asked, in another voice drop. Maya's voice came through, and this time she was screaming. "He's right behind us! Run!" As she screamed, the rustling sound morphed into a low, guttural whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but the sound itself was pure malice. It turned my blood to ice. This has to be a prank, I thought, trying to rationalize it. They're just trying to scare me. "This isn't funny anymore, guys," I said angrily into the phone. The next message was from Sam. His voice was trembling and he was sobbing. "Don't look back, please. Don't look back." This wasn't a prank. This was raw, unfiltered terror. I froze, paralyzed by fear. I swept my flashlight in a wide arc. The tall, dead stalks of corn seemed to press in on me from all sides. I was completely alone. With trembling hands, I exited the app and made a direct phone call to Sam. He picked up on the second ring. "Dude, where are you?" he asked, his voice perfectly calm and laced with annoyance. "We've been waiting for you at the entrance for 15 minutes. My world tilted on its axis. "What? You're in the maze, you were just sending me messages." "What messages?" he said. "The last one we sent was 20 minutes ago telling you we were heading out. We figured you were right behind us. Your app must be bugging out." "No," I stammered, my voice shaking. "No, it was you." Maya was screaming. "What are you talking about?" Sam said, his voice now laced with concern. "Maya's right here with me, drinking hot chocolate. Are you okay?" He handed the phone to her. "Leo, what's wrong? Are you all right?" Her voice was perfectly normal. My mind couldn't process it. If they were at the entrance, then whose voices had I been following? At that exact moment, my phone buzzed with one final notification. A new voice drop from the MazeLink app. I knew I shouldn't listen, but I couldn't stop myself. I pressed play. It wasn't Sam's voice. It wasn't Maya's. It was a low, raspy, guttural whisper spoken so closely into the microphone it felt like it was being whispered directly into my ear. It was a voice that sounded ancient and evil, and it spoke 4 simple words that still echo in my nightmares. Now, you're lost, too. I have never screamed so loud in my life. I threw my phone and ran. I didn't know which way I was going. I just ran, crashing through the cornstalks, falling and scrambling back up, fueled by pure adrenaline. Behind me, I could hear the rustling sound, keeping pace with me, following me through the suffocating darkness. I don't know how long I ran. Eventually, I burst through the edge of the maze and collapsed against a wooden fence far on the backside of the farm, away from the lights and the noise of the main event. I never used the MazeLink app again. Later, I did some research online. I found a few old news articles about Blackwood Farms. Over the years, several people had gotten lost in the maze, some for hours, some overnight. But there was one story from nearly 50 years ago about a young boy who went into the maze during the festival and was never seen again. No trace of him was ever found. Were the voices I heard just a technological glitch? Or did I hear the maze's echo that night, the desperate cries of those who were lost before me and the whisper of whatever it is that still hunts in those cornfields? What would you do if your phone started playing voices that weren't from your friends? It's a question that haunts me every time my phone rings with an unknown number. Sometimes the truest horror isn't found in the dark woods or empty houses people tell you to fear. Sometimes it's sitting right beside you in a crowd, hidden in plain sight, watching you with an unnerving stillness. This real event happened to my family last October, and it turned an innocent family tradition into a haunting memory that I can never erase. My wife Sarah and I have a tradition of taking our 8-year-old daughter Lily to a place called Old Creek Farms every autumn. It was our annual ritual, pumpkin picking, getting lost in the corn maze, and most importantly, enjoying their famous haunted hayride. It had always been the perfect kind of family-friendly fright, a little spooky but in a safe, controlled environment. This year was no different. The night was dark, the air was cold, and we climbed aboard a large, hay-filled wagon hitched to an old tractor. The wagon was packed with other families, a lively mix of laughing children and excited parents. The ride began, pulling us down a dark, wooded trail. Every few minutes, costumed actors, zombies, werewolves, the usual suspects, would leap out from the trees, eliciting a fun wave of screams and laughter from the kids. It was exactly as it had been every year before. About halfway through, as the ride ventured into the deepest part of the woods, I felt a strange prickle on the back of my neck, the distinct unnerving feeling of being stared at. I glanced around. Everyone else was focused on the actors, caught up in the show. Then my eyes landed on the far back corner of the wagon. A man was sitting there. He was completely out of place. He wasn't with a family. He wasn't wearing a costume, just old, dark work clothes and a worn, wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. He wasn't reacting to any of the scares, no flinching, no laughing, no gasping. He was just sitting there perfectly still like a stone statue. And he was staring at my daughter, Lily. His gaze was unwavering. It was a blank, emotionless stare, yet it held an unnerving intensity. My paternal instincts kicked in immediately. "Sarah," I whispered, nudging my wife. "Look at the guy in the back corner." Sarah discreetly turned. "Who? The one in the hat?" she murmured. "He's probably just one of the farm hands." I tried to tell myself she was right, but why would a farmhand be sitting on the ride? And why would he be staring at a little girl with such unnerving focus? His presence was deeply unsettling. I decided to keep an eye on him. I pulled Lily closer, wrapping my arm around her, and started staring back at the man. When he noticed me watching him, he didn't look away. He just continued his fixed stare as if challenging me. The ride pulled into a clearing where a large bonfire was blazing. The tractor stopped. This was the storytelling break. Everyone began to climb off the wagon to gather around the fire. "Let's go," I said to Sarah, keeping the man in my peripheral vision. We got off, but the man didn't. He remained on the wagon, a silent shadow in the darkness, away from the warm glow of the fire. 10 minutes later, as everyone started reboarding, I made sure we sat far away from him. But as we settled into our spot, I saw that he had moved. He was now in the middle of the wagon, just a few feet from my family. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. This couldn't be a coincidence. I locked my eyes on him, making it clear that I was watching his every move. He slowly turned his head toward me, and in the shadow of his hat, I could have sworn I saw the faintest hint of a smile. A cold, ominous smirk. The rest of the ride was agony. I didn't see a single costumed actor. My focus was entirely on that man. He remained unnaturally still, but I could feel his presence like a physical weight, like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to close in on its prey. Finally, the ride was over. The tractor pulled back to the starting point and people began to disembark. I quickly lifted Lily into my arms. "I'm going to say something to that guy," I told Sarah, my voice low and tense. I turned to face him. He was gone. The wagon was still crowded with people getting off, but the spot where he had been sitting was now empty. I scanned the crowd, my eyes darting everywhere. He was nowhere to be seen. He had vanished as if he had never been there at all. "Where did he go?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I said, a cold fear now gripping me. We hurried to our car. I buckled Lily into her car seat in the back, my head on a swivel, constantly scanning the dark parking lot for any sign of the man. As we pulled out of the farm and onto the main road, our headlights swept across a line of trees at the edge of the parking lot. For a split second, he was illuminated. He was standing there just inside the tree line, perfectly still. He was wearing the same hat and he was staring directly at our car. Then as we turned the corner, he was swallowed by the darkness once more. We drove the rest of the way home in absolute silence. We both knew that what we had seen wasn't a misunderstanding or a prank. It was real. The next day, I called the farm and spoke to the manager. I told him about the man, thinking he might be a new employee with a serious behavioral problem. The manager's voice grew grave. "Sir, all of our staff wear uniforms and none of them ride on the wagons with the guests." He paused for a moment, then added quietly, "Over the last few years, we've had a few similar complaints about a strange man who appears on the ride and then disappears. We always assumed it was just people's imaginations running wild in the dark." He continued, "The police have even been called a few times, but they've never found anyone." Hearing that sent a chill down my spine. He wasn't an employee. He wasn't a drifter. He was something else. We didn't go back to Old Creek Farms for the Halloween season this year. We probably never will. I still think about that man all the time. Was he a real person, a predator using the chaos of the event as cover? Or was he part of a darker, older story tied to that land? A ghost who returns each year for his favorite ride? And the most terrifying question of all is this: what would have happened if I hadn't been watching him so closely? What if I had dismissed him as just another face in the crowd? That thought is what keeps me awake at night.